Let me start today by introducing our guest, Jon Maginot, who all of you know, the Assistant City Manager for Los Altos, has been serving the residents here for 15 years, and we're thrilled to have Jon here with us today. He's been making the rounds, getting the word out about district-based elections. And Jon, we know you guys have a lot going on as always, so really appreciate you coming today and spending some time with all of us.
Well, thank you. Thank you. And thank you all for having me and spending some time this morning listening to me go on about district-based elections and being here. I'm hoping that we can accomplish two things this morning. One is to provide some information to you and answer your questions and help you understand a little bit more the process. And then the second is I hope that that was the shortest bio that any speaker has ever had and will have. While I'm pulling up the presentation here, Joe and I kept going back and forth, and I think Joe kept asking me to do something longer and longer for my bio, and I kept trying to go shorter and shorter. So hopefully that was
It,
quick.
it was
Um,
perfect. It was perfect.
yeah. So and those who have seen this presentation or a version of this presentation, I will appreciate your feedback of telling me, well, you did better this time than that time, or that other presentation you did better and whatnot. But this will be a lot of the same that you've already seen, but it's all right. So the city, as you have heard, the city is transitioning from at-large elections to district-based elections, and I'll go into a little bit of the why and what that means if I can get my slides to advance. So currently, the city holds at-large elections where all the council members are elected by the entire city voting base. If you're a registered voter in Los Altos, you know that this upcoming November, we'll have an election where you will vote for 3 council members. 2 years ago, you voted for 2 council members. With a transition to district-based election, each council member will be elected by a single voting district. So you will vote for 1 council member every 4 years. And we'll have 5 districts in Los Altos. And one of the questions that I think, or the first question everybody asks themselves when they hear this or they find out about this for the first time is, well, that's dumb. Why would we want to do that? And that's a great question. And the why is because state law is, I'll say, compelling us to. The California Voting Rights Act, which was adopted about 25 years ago, is has a number of provisions and parts of it to prevent a lot of what we have seen historically in other areas throughout the country, throughout the state, where certain demographics are seeing their votes diluted, or there's a history of racially polarized voting. So the CVRA includes a 3-point test to determine whether or not an agency, a city, a school district, a special district is in violation of the act. The first point is, does the agency hold at-large elections? Is there an occurrence of racially polarized voting? That's where a demographic is not able to elect representatives from their demographic. Or is there a history of vote dilution, where again the votes of a certain demographic are being diluted by votes from other demographics? And so you have to meet 2 of those criteria to be in violation of the CVRA. Of course, the city holds at-large elections, and since we hold at-large elections, we are open to a lawsuit or legal challenge based on that simple fact. So the city received a notice back in April that we were in violation of the CVRA. And under state law that we were given 90 days to either transition to district-based elections or face a lawsuit. And so we are not the first city who has received this notice nor gone through this process. The city council weighed a number of different options, including, well, do we fight this thing or do we make the transition? They took into account that every agency or city that has fought this process has ultimately lost and has ultimately paid hundreds of thousands and even millions and millions of dollars in legal fees and attorneys' fees. And so the council basically, just discussed and made the decision, we can either we can fight it, pay millions and millions of dollars and have a court tell us what our district boundaries will be, or we can accept it and move through, even though we don't want to, we can accept that we need to do this and go through the process and control what the districts look like and control the process itself. And so they provided the direction to do so by October 31st. And now I know you're all smart enough to realize that October 31st is far more than 90 days after April 18th. And that's the council asked our attorneys, and our attorneys were able to work with the attorney who sent the notice, whose name I'm not going to mention, and were able to get an extension to October 31st. So a little bit about the process of how we are going to go about doing this. The city is legally required to hold at least 5 public meetings related to districting. The first 2 meetings were to be held prior to the development of any sort of draft maps. So we held those meetings in June and July, got a lot of great input and feedback from the community, got a lot of questions, primarily of which was, well, why this is dumb. After that, our demographer went and developed draft maps, and I'll go over the process of how they came up with the maps that they came up with here in just a moment. We then held our 3rd meeting on August 28th. That was in my view, was a great meeting in which we were able to go through and discuss the process and what happens over the next few weeks as the city and the community are coming up with the maps. That also kicked off our community outreach phase. This is, I keep struggling to come up with the right analogy because it's a sprint, but it's also a marathon. We were talking earlier about Tuesday night we were at a community organization. Wednesday we were at another one. Last night we were at the farmers market. Pretty much every day in September, there's some sort of event or opportunity for the public and the community to come and to provide feedback and input. And some days there's 2 and even 3 opportunities. And all of this is going to lead up to the meeting number 4, which is on September 24th, where we will present to the council, here is everything that we heard from the public. We'll also present a lot of the information that the council requested at the August 28th meeting. There were a number of different we're calling them heat maps, sort of where are certain populations living, where and it could be anything of socioeconomic status. It could be what is the voting age, the voting age, how is that dispersed throughout the city? What do the school boundaries look like? There's a number of other sort of maps that the council is hoping to look for or to look at, which will inform them on the direction that they want to go. At that meeting, the goal is for the council to say, okay, this is the map we want to move forward with. There might be some, well, let's move this boundary over this way, and what if we, adjusted it this way? And all that will lead up to October 8th, when the city council will adopt the final map. Now, it is important to note that this transition will be for the November 2026 city council election. So we're currently in election season for the city council. This process and action will not affect this coming November's election in any way. So that is the process. As I say, we are currently in the community outreach phase. It is red because red is an angry color, and I think frustration and anger is a common feeling that I am sensing from a lot of the people that we talk to. So I mentioned that our demographer has developed some maps, and I'll show you those. You may have seen them already, but they've come up with 3 maps. Now, these maps, there's a couple of things that I've been telling everybody about these maps. The first is, don't get used to these maps. I would suggest not getting too attached to any one map in particular, because the final, most likely none of these maps will be the final map that is decided. The purpose of these draft maps is simply to give us something to talk about, right? It's one thing to look at a map of the city and say, well, where should we draw the lines? And it's another to look at these maps and say, well, here's how the city could be divided into districts, how we could draw the lines. And so as we go through the process, we will find that, well, we need to make an adjustment this way. We need to make an adjustment that way. We need to weigh certain factors over others. And that's how we're going to draw the lines. The other thing that I tell everybody is the numbers and the colors don't mean a thing. It's simply based on when the demographer was drafting the map, where they started with in drawing the districts. And so the first district that they drew for that map became District 1, the next one became District 2, and so forth. And then when they moved to, say, from map A to map B, they started in a different part of the city, and that became 1, and then they went to 2 and 3 and 4. So the numbers, the colors don't mean anything other than when the demographer, the process the demographer went through in drawing it. And one of the things that we will get from the city council, hopefully at the September 24th meeting, is how to label the districts. They could choose 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They could choose A, B, C, D, E. There's no set requirement from state law as to how we label or identify the districts. They will also hopefully provide direction on which 2 districts will be up for election in November of 2026. And again, there's some criteria, but there's no real set standard or process for them to determine which districts go first. So how the demographer came up with these maps, I mentioned we held our first 2 meetings before the development of any draft maps. Following that, we implemented an online tool in which members of the public can go and go through an exercise to draft districts themselves. They can submit those maps. Those are posted on the city's website if you want to go take a look. And some of the maps we are calling protest maps. These are maps that clearly don't meet any of the legal requirements. They're even labeled things such as districts are bad or no districts, etc. Um, and then there are some maps in which the demographer looked at and said, well, with a few tweaks, we can make this map. Um, the term I use is more legal, but that's not the right term. And the attorneys on the call, I'm sure, are just cringing when I say that. But how can we make them so that they better fit the criteria under state law? There's 5 things that the demographer is looking at, and they are ranked in order of importance. The first is the districts have to be relatively equal in size, and that is defined by number of persons living in the district. And so there's a statistical formula for determining the deviation between the districts. And so that's the first thing that they look at. And so when they looked at the maps drawn by the public, they may have said, this district is a little too big, so what if we adjust it this way? And that's how they came up with these maps. And so, as I say, they're just here to give us something to talk about. This process will continue. We encourage members of the public to go online, to find the mapping tool, and to try it out for themselves, to submit maps for themselves. Some of the things that we are asking residents and voters to look at to help them as they identify how their district should be drawn is, find their home, find where they live, and think about, okay, where do I shop? Where do I go to the park? Where do my kids go to school, or where do the neighbor kids go to school? Where do I walk my dog, or go for my evening walk? If I attend a faith-based organization, where do I go for that? Right? Really thinking about what is my my sort of micro community. We've got the community at large, but where do I what areas of the city or neighborhood are drawing me, and developing maps based on that. And so, as I mentioned, members of the public can submit maps now and can continue to do so, and those maps will be considered by the city council. The demographer will use those maps and come up with other alternatives as well. It is entirely possible that a member of the public draws a map that all of us say, you know what, that's the one we're going to go with, and the city council adopts that map as the map that we move forward with. And so that will all lead up to, as I said earlier, the September 24th meeting. So what happens next? I've talked a little bit about it. We're going to continue with the community outreach. You're welcome to check out the city's website, which I'll have on the next slide, I believe. That lists many of the opportunities to get involved and to provide input. Of course, you're always welcome to reach out to me, to any other member of the staff, and we'll move forward towards the September 24th council meeting. We'll then have the October 8th council meeting where they will approve the final map. And so, ways to provide input. I've mentioned attending any number of the community engagement events. You can email districts, that's plural. I think at another meeting I had said district, singular, but it is plural, at losaltosca.gov. You can visit the city's website. We have a page dedicated to district-based elections. You can find a link to it on our homepage, losaltosca.gov. And then any of the community engagement events between now and September 24th. And of course, even after September 24th, you'll be able to provide input and feedback on the process and on the maps. And with that, I have no more information to present. So I'm
Well,
happy to answer any questions.
that's great. Thanks, John. Really comprehensive overview. So thanks for that. Um, I have a few questions, and then we'll open it up to the audience in a few minutes. One of the things as we were watching, I realize has come up a lot is there's never been a full explanation of what the city did that caused us to trip up with the CVRA. And I don't know if we meet two or three of those criteria, but we do have our at-large elections, so that's clearly one. Was it, the so-called racially polarized voting that triggered it? And if so, could you talk a little bit about what triggered it, and then how this is going to potentially solve that problem?
Sure. I always hesitate when I'm asked a legal question because I am not a lawyer.
Sure.
Nothing I say should be taken as legally binding in any way. But the from my view, what the city did to trigger this was simply having at-large elections. As I mentioned, um, a suit can be brought to an organization or an agency simply for having at-large elections. The attorney or individual or plaintiff who brings the suit does not have to provide evidence necessarily of racially polarized voting or vote dilution in order to bring the suit. Of course, during a trial or in court documents, there will need to be further evidence, but um, in general, courts will simply look and say, yeah, you have at-large elections, you're in violation of the CVRA. And so the notice that the city received, which is on the city's website if you want to go read it, did have allegations of racially polarized voting. You can read through what those are, but again, there's no requirement to provide empirical evidence or data necessarily to support that allegation.
Okay, great. That makes
So
sense.
I guess the short answer is the city existed and had at-large elections.
Got it. Yeah, and I recall at some of the prior community meetings, specifically at Grant Park, there was a lot of confusion around like, oh well, I live in a diverse neighborhood. My friend down the block came from Vietnam, and like there was a feeling that this was a solution to having racism in Los Altos. And I think what I've learned through the process is it's not necessarily going to solve any racism that is here already. It's just there's a law, we triggered it, and whether or not the proposed solution districting actually fixes whatever purported problem there is, it's the law, so we just got to move forward with it. Does that match your understanding?
Yeah, I mean, I won't go into whether it will solve problems or not, but the direction from the city council, and I think I'm safe in reporting that each city council member has basically said in during public meetings, we don't like this. It's state law. We have to do it. So
Yep.
I know a couple of them have said, I'm doing this kicking and screaming, and
Yep.
without the actual kicking or screaming. But
Yeah, I've yet to meet anybody who thinks this is a good idea. So there's probably some people out there, but so given some of the confusion around this, if there was one thing that you wanted everybody in Los Altos to know about the process or the outcome or whatever, what would it be?
Yeah, I think the number one thing I would want people to know is it is incredibly important for you to be involved in the process. Um, this is something that the community will really drive what the final map looks like. Um, we, as much as, I know where, okay, I know where the schools are, I know where the parks are, I know how where the shopping districts are, I know um, where the main roads are, where some of the walking paths are, etc. But what I don't know is where you individually and your neighborhood, where you are drawn to, right? And so um, we had a meeting the other night where an excellent point was brought up of, if we divide along main roads, which is one of the criteria that the city needs to look at, um, we could be dividing uh, neighborhoods and communities that have shared interest. And the example that was brought up, which I thought was absolutely perfect, was Almond Avenue, right? That's a large main road, or large and main for the city of Los Altos. But the folks on the north side of Almond Avenue and the folks on the south side of Almond Avenue have um, a lot of common interests. In fact, they probably have, somebody on the north side probably has more in common with somebody on the south side than the people to the north of them, right? And so that kind of input and feedback of, oh, I live on this street and uh, my district should include the other side of the street, or it should include this neighborhood, or, we had at the council meeting last week, uh, individual who said, I live in the Highlands, um, but I do my shopping at Loyola Corners and Rancho. And so knowing where you all sort of gravitate to, and I know some of you say, well, it's the entire city. I understand that, but what does your neighborhood consist of? What are you drawn to? Where are your interests? And so that will help us as we are drawing the maps. Um, and so I think that is the one thing I would want people to know is we need you. This will be driven by you, um, and the city council is wanting to hear from you and get your input.
Okay, great. So, given, you know, a majority of people, it seems like, are opposed to this. We've heard at some of the community events suggestions like, why don't we sue? Why don't we band together with a bunch of other cities and exert our power and try to get this changed? But we are on a path, with a October 31st Halloween deadline. Spooky stuff to do something. Do you is there a chance that something may happen between now and October 31st that would take us off this course, or are we pretty much locked into implementing districts before that deadline?
Yeah, that's a great question. The answer that I'll give is, of course, anything could happen. Um, I don't anticipate anything happening to change our direction, but certainly something could happen. The direction that I have been given from the city council is we are going to transition to district-based elections by October 31st and make it happen. And so certainly anything could happen um, between now and then. But I would anticipate and planning towards on October 8th, the city council will adopt the final map and will have completed the process to move towards district-based elections.
Okay, great. Thank you. So you talked about, input from the residents, and I know uh, there's the tool for drawing the maps. Does the city staff feel like you've gotten enough resident input, or do you need more people drawing maps and providing feedback at this point?
Yeah, we will always need more. I don't know that we'll ever reach a point where something new won't come up, or a new idea, new concept, new question. So we're always needing more, and always encouraging folks to get involved and to provide their input and their thoughts on the process.
Okay, great. Well, that was all the questions I have. I'm gonna switch us over to gallery view and allow the attendees to ask questions. So if you could please raise your virtual hand and I'll call on you. Reminder, one question per person and no speeches, please. So let's go to Janine.
Thank you. Excuse me. Hi, John.
Hi,
Do
Janine.
you have any comments to make about what's going on in Santa Monica?
Oh, that is a great question, and would be better asked to an attorney. I know the city of Santa Monica is one of the cities that has been fighting the same attorney in the move towards district elections. It has gotten up to as far as the Supreme Court, and I believe, has been sent back down to a lower court for further analysis and discussion. I know that there have been those who have said, well, the Santa Monica has won that case, and I believe that is inaccurate. I think it is still under review and still within the courts. And the city of Santa Monica is still paying their attorneys to continue to fight it. Again, I would encourage and suggest doing folks to research the case and draw their own conclusions, as I am not an attorney and not somebody who should be speaking knowledgeably about what exactly is going on in that case.
Thank you.
Yeah, and Janine, I would just say I've seen some stuff posted online. I forget which forum it was in that had some correct facts and had some inaccuracies as well. So I think we're all kind of wondering, like, is there going to be some precedent that could help us out in some way? And I have confidence that the council and the legal team will be paying a lot of attention to that. But from what I've seen, the Santa Monica output is indeterminate at this point, and I know John probably can't comment on that. But anyway, let's go over to Jim. If you could unmute. There you go, Jim.
Thanks. Hi, John.
Hey, Jim.
I have so many questions, but I'll just ask one. Um, I'm struggling to understand why I should really care what the district boundaries are. I mean, yes, the people across the street from me might be in a different district, or my grocery store might be in a different district. It's actually in a different town right now. But yeah, does it really matter in terms of my representation on the city council, exactly where that boundary is?
Yeah, that's a great question. And the best answer I think I can give is it may not matter to you. You may look at it and say, draw it wherever. I don't care. I will admit I live in a city that has district elections. I can tell you who or what district I'm in, and who my council member is. But if you were to ask me, well, where are the boundaries of your district? I don't know that I could tell you. And so it may not matter to you one way or another. And if that's so, fantastic. We want to hear that as well. But there may be others who it does matter, right? And who say, I want my neighborhood to remain intact so that we can influence the council with our shared interest and our shared priorities. So I guess the short answer is it may not matter, right? And it may not matter to you, and that is perfectly fine. And that is still feedback that we as the city want and need to hear from you, right?
All right, I am not seeing other hands. Anyone else have a question before I let Jim ask his other 12 questions? Or anybody? All right, Jim, I don't know if you really. Oh, we're gonna go to Daphne first, and then we'll come back to you. Go ahead, Daphne.
Thanks, sorry.
Just in under
Um,
the wire.
I guess following that, like, are there any insights based on cities similar in size to Los Altos about how the proceedings of the city council change when there are district elections, or how the conversations change? I mean, obviously in larger cities, this I would think this makes more of a difference, but in a city that's like 30,000 people or whatever, what are the conversations at council
Yeah.
become, or how do they change based on this?
Yeah, I mean that is a great question. I don't know that we have any hard data on how it changes. Of course, the ideal is that even though a council member is elected to a specific district, they will still keep the interests of the entire city at heart. They will approach every decision with that sort of holistic view. And there will be a number of council members who will do so, right? They will say, yeah, I'm elected to from this district, but I represent the entire city, and so I'm gonna, make the decisions that are best for the city. There's always the chance that we will get a council member who says, I'm only interested in what is going on in my district. I'm not going to support anything that happens in any other district. And that is a distinct possibility. And it could change the dynamics. I think we won't know until we've gone through a few cycles, a few election cycles, and we have all of the council members are from districts, and we can see sort of the interaction and the dynamic on council.
And Daphne, just two quick anecdotes. One is in Menlo Park, where there was a woman close to the Bay who ran for many years and couldn't get elected. And when they implemented district-based elections, she did get elected and now serves on the Menlo Park City Council. So that was an example where I actually think the application of the CVRA was appropriate, because there's a pretty wide socioeconomic spectrum across Menlo Park from the Bay all the way to 280.
Yeah.
It's East Palo Alto to Atherton, basically. The other example I've heard is Campbell, California, which is around 40,000 population, so a little bit bigger than us. And the biggest challenge they have been facing is with actually getting people to run. I spoke with one of the council members there, and they, for 5 districts, they had 3 where nobody was running, and so they dragged a guy out of retirement. I think he might be in his 80s, who had previously served on council and was able to serve again. Didn't want to, but like no one else stepped up. And then I believe the other 2 districts, someone came forward and ran unopposed. So I think the biggest challenges are around like finding people who are willing to run, and it's hard enough to mount a campaign, as some here are in the middle of doing right now. But when you reduce it down to 1/5 the size, it gets even more difficult. So anyway, two anecdotes. I'm sure there are others around the Bay Area. Foster City just got hit with a letter, so they're going to go through the same thing. I don't know their size. So Janine, if it's okay with you, I'm going to go to Shally, and then I'll come back to you. So Shally, go ahead.
Uh, thanks. Thanks, John, for this presentation. I know school districts are going through a similar thing right now. I'm kind of watching Fremont Union High School District as they're going through this process. So my question to you is, once council decides which map they're going to use, what is the process for how we switch over to district-based elections? Considering that half the council will be voted at large.
Sure.
Thanks.
It's a great question. In the answer really is there won't be much of a process. The council will adopt the maps, and we'll adopt an ordinance, so it'll go into our municipal code. The maps will let the registrar of voters know what our districts are, and then at the next the 2026 election, we will be in the district process. Now, that does mean that we will have after the November 2026 election, we will have 3 council members who have been elected to represent the city at large. They will remain on council until the end of their terms. And then if they are eligible to run for a re-election, they would need to do so if their district is up for election. So if I were running for council this year and was elected, and in 2028, I was up for, my term was up, and I wanted to run for city council, but my district was not one of the 3 that was up for election in 2028, I would not be able to run. I would have to wait until 2030. And so we'll have a short transition period, about 2 years or so, where we have 3 council members who have been elected at large, and then 2 council members who have been elected by district. And so then for the 2028 election, after that, we will have each council member would have been elected by a district.
Yeah, it is complex for sure. So we John, it sounds like in 2026, after that election, we could have both at large and district representatives until we get to 2028, and then it would be all district representatives. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, great. All right, Janine, go ahead.
At the last council meeting, there was, and I don't remember who made the comment. There was a comment about keeping the whole in El Camino corridor together, and I believe it was Jonathan that said that answered the query and said, we've heard that before, but there are some reasons why that doesn't make sense, and I'm paraphrasing majorly. Is that something is there some reasoning that we're not aware of as to why there's something about the CVRA or whatever that might say that's why that is? There was no reason given.
Yeah.
Very curious about that.
That's a great question. I'm writing down your questions as you ask them, because I want to include them in FAQs and primers, because I'm sure other people will have the similar questions, right? And so I mentioned earlier the city has to look at 5 different criteria for drawing the districts. The first criteria is that they're relatively the same in size. The second criteria is that they are contiguous. We can't have a pocket of the district over here and a pocket of the district here with a district running in between them. The third is that we maintain communities of interest. That's the neighborhoods that I was talking about earlier, that we're trying to find out where you are living, where you are involved, what you are doing. Then there's also that the boundaries have to be along easily identifiable lines. We can't have go from this street up to here and then down like this, and all through side streets and back roads to form the district. And then the last is that it has to be compact. We can't have these long, skinny districts stretching the length of the city. And so the council and the community will weigh those criteria when we draw the maps. Of course, as I mentioned, they are in order of importance. And so if we have a map that says that we think is fantastic and it keeps all of El Camino together, and it works, we might be able to do it. But if it does so and it violates some of the criteria above it, then we can't do it. And so that's all going to be weighed in on whether or not in how we adopt the final map. And so I I don't recall the exact comment that you may be referring to, but I'm guessing that it may have been more of a, we might not be able to keep El Camino Real together, simply for other reasons, because we need to
Okay.
draw the lines a certain way.
Okay, only
we-
because a district map, I think it's district map. There is one of the maps that does do that, so
Yeah.
I just didn't know. I wanted to understand why I should not prefer that map,
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
because of that comment. Thank you.
and I see
and
Jonathan has his hand raised. I don't know, Jonathan, if you have a question or you wanted to share your thoughts on that question before.
Thanks, Joe. Yeah, I just wanted to share my thoughts on that because Janine mentioned my name on it. I mean, John really already answered the question very well, but there's nothing with respect to the CVRA that I'm aware of that says El Camino should be together or it should be split. There was a comment from a member of the public at our second meeting who suggested that Los Altos on one side of San Antonio along El Camino is very different from the community on the other side of El Camino, and was advocating for them not to be a part of the same district. I am not taking a position on that. I have not taken a position on that. I simply noted that there was a member of the community who had noted that. And I think Nisa had to follow up on that as well. But my comments were only meant to reflect that this is a part of the public record, and these are the sorts of things that the council needs to know about as we continue to gather information and go through the process of deciding what maps we're going to ultimately support. But I did want to clarify that as far as I know, there is nothing in the CVRA or any other part of California law that would compel us or make any kind of a persuasive argument that El Camino should be together or should not.
Yeah.
Great.
And I think I'll reiterate, the important thing to keep in mind is we have to follow the criteria and we have to follow them in order, right? So an example at the other end of the city, the portion of the city that is boundaried for the Cupertino Union School District, that's been mentioned a few times and was discussed during the council meeting, right? That's a community of interest. It really is. I mean, the kids in that area all go to the same schools, and ideally we would have a district that would keep all of let me back up. We might ideally want to have a district that has all of the CUSD together.
Yeah.
But if we did, that district would be too large, right? And so because that is superseded by a different criteria, we are going to have to split up the folks who are boundaried for CUSD, so that we are meeting the criteria. And so that's something that the council will have to consider, and as the mayor has said, is something that they will be looking at. Is, some folks say, yeah, we should be together. Other folks will say, no, we shouldn't be together. And so how do we best balance all of the interests in the community and still comply with the criteria in the state law?
And I don't know if our friend Eric wants to comment. I know Eric is on El Camino, and you don't have to if you don't want to, Eric, but I thought you might be able to provide some perspective on why keep it together versus why keep it separate, given your distinguished knowledge of the Planning Commission as well as this districting issue. Would you care to comment?
I would. Because I'm the person that Jonathan just referred to who suggested that. And I think that
I had a feeling.
You had a feeling. No, I actually am very strongly against making El Camino Real a single district. I'll say a couple of things. One, if I had been able to figure out how to raise my hand, and I cannot find a single way on this stupid screen to raise my hand, I would have done it to ask John the question, is this graven in stone? And John's answer would have been no, because it's done by the census every 10 years. And so in 2030, there's going to be another census, and we will go through this operation again if we have this same system. That's something to keep in mind when you're looking at drawing the lines. These lines will only be there for about 5 years. And then they're going to have to be drawn again, depending on what the census says. So it's not worth staying up late at night worrying about which side of the street you're on, because that's not going to be forever, aside from other things like that. And I may have a different view in 5 years. Who knows? I may have a different view this afternoon. That's the way my mind works. But I do think one of the problems that I have detected in the 15 years that I've been here and on El Camino is that there's a way to people tend to think of El Camino Real as being not part of Los Altos. People tend to think of El Camino Real as something else. And I very much oppose that. And one of the ways to avoid doing that is not to have it always be a single place. That's number one. Number two, the West End, which is where I am in the far northwest in the tundra, there's a polar bear outside my window, is very different from the eastern side, which goes down towards Rengstorff. And they're very different considerations. Those are very different neighborhoods, and their contiguous neighborhoods are also different. I think we are better served by thinking about Los Altos as going from the south to the north than we are thinking about it as going from the west to the east. And so those are reasons that I oppose having El Camino Real be a single district. I understand for zoning purposes, which is my life, that makes perfect sense, but it does not make sense for this. Okay. I also want to throw into the mix a completely different issue, which is there may be some other ways going forward in the future where we'll be able to do this. This is all about just counting votes. It's not about where people live, but it's about counting votes and having groups of votes that are relatively equal to provide bigger bang for the buck for each one that votes. There are other methods for counting votes that don't require you to live in a particular neighborhood. Unfortunately, for us to be able to take advantage of those, we would have to become a charter city. And that may be something that we want to talk about. There could be some unintended consequences of doing that, et cetera. But there are some solutions that don't involve going through this process every 10 years. Okay.
All right.
So that's something that I throw out as something that perhaps the Community Coalition might want to have some discussions about at some point. No rush, because it's not going to happen right away. But those are the kinds of issues that this raises. Okay. In the short term, however, okay, I have some reasons, as I say, for not wanting El Camino Real to be a single district. And we are going to do this again in a few years anyway. So let's see where it goes. Okay.
Thank you, Eric. Wind him up and let him go. I thought it was relevant because the same could be said about, downtown, for example. Should that be one contiguous district or two separate ones? But I'm going to go to Steve, and then we'll wrap up after Steve's question. Go ahead, Steve.
Okay, well, Eric gave a very good prelude to my question. Are we prepared to discuss whether we move to a charter city, recognizing the pressure that we have a short-term deadline to create these districts?
All right, John, do you want to tackle the charter city question? I'm sure you've heard it before.
I will tackle it by deflecting. That is a conversation that I think
that was my guess, that we have to deflect.
Others can have. The direction that I've received from the city council is let's move forward with district election or transitioning to district elections and get it done by October 31st. And so that is the direction that the city is moving. Of course, you all and any member of the community can have conversations that you want, that many of which I will not be a part of.
Fair enough. And I figured that would be the answer. But Steve, maybe you can give Eric a call and chat. We're making connections here today. So we're gonna wrap it up here. John, super helpful, lots of great info, and more, I'm sure there's more discussion to come once these maps are finalized. But thank you for doing that today. And a few announcements. Our next meeting will be Friday, September 20th from 8:30 to 9:30. Please join us for a discussion entitled Santa Clara County School Board Candidates with Grace Ma and Jessica Spicer. As you know, there are more than just city council elections going on. There's all sorts of stuff for supervisor, as well as school boards, MVLA, etc. So we're just a little preview. We're going to have the county board first, and then the subsequent program on MVLA for the high school districts after that. If you'd like to be added to the LACC mailing list, please send an email to info@losaltoscommunitycoalition.org. This should be somewhere in the chat. Thanks, Kim. And big thank you to Los Altos Mountain View Community Foundation. Adine, I didn't know you'd be here, and I didn't know this was your last day, but we have had a great collaboration together for many years. And on behalf of the steering committee as well as the broader community, just want to thank you for the many years of service you've given to Los Altos and Mountain View and Los Altos Hills and elsewhere. We really
Much
appreciate it.
appreciated. Thank you so much. Been a
Yeah.
pleasure. Been an honor.
Any parting words before you go?
Contrary to some kind of rumor, I have not moved to Idaho or Iowa. I'm still a resident in the community. So I'm going to take a few months off and then figure out some next steps, and look forward to sort of participating as a resident instead of this professional role.
Well, we wouldn't be able to do what we do without the support from the Community Foundation. So thank you again. And if you move to a state that begins with I, let us know, please. But thanks again. So we'll wrap it up there, and we'll see everybody in a couple of weeks. Thank you.